Okay, so this is what we're going to build. All right? And what we have is we've got this idea of the Acme company. And the Acme company, let's say that this is an app that maybe I'm setting up for salespeople. Okay? An Acme company has offices all over the place, but they also have stores, right? They sell some products. And so in different places or in different locations, okay, they can have stores and they can end up having offices. So if I looked at this drop-down list, what I would see is that I've got a actually, I think this is probably incorrect, but we're gonna when we do ours, it'll end up. No, that actually is right. Okay, so we've got our 3 offices. We've got an office at the Statue of Liberty, we've got an office at the Empire State Building, and we've got an office down by Full Stack. We've got stores, and we only have 2 stores. We have one at the Statue of Liberty, and we have one at the Empire State Building. Okay? From a database model perspective, 3 models. Office has a name. Store has a name. Both a store and an office, okay, they have to have a location. They belong to a place. Okay? A place also has a name. Okay? And the only thing a place has, because we want to use Google Maps, is a place has a latitude and a longitude. And that's the only thing that you'll probably see me cut and paste depending on how far we end up getting. All my Google Maps is doing, by the way, is I'm setting up a map here. I'm actually looping over on the client side, not on the server, on the client side. I'm looping over my offices, and I'm putting them here, and I'm actually setting the bounds of my map. Right now, there is no relationship between these things. For the next demo that we'll end up doing, which I don't think we'll end up doing till next Monday, there's going to be a demo where you could basically have the concept, same sort of thing as I was talking about the trip planner, the concept of a day. Okay? And a viewer, this would be set up so that this would be maybe a salesperson there, and they're setting up a trip to see different offices and stores. And every day, they're going to be able to set up their itinerary so that they have the option of seeing one store and one office. Okay? They can see no stores, just an office. They can see an office and not a store, or they can see nothing. But they're going to be able to have different days that they could go through. Again, it's a little bit of a simplified version of the what we'll end up doing, what you'll end up doing in the workshop. So let's get started with this. There's a bunch of different modules that I'm going to need here. So I'm going to say npm init. There's nothing in here now. So I'll go in here, I'll say npm init, yes. And again, this is all stuff you've seen, so we know that we're going to need Sequelize. We know that we're going to end up needing Postgres. We know that we're going to need Express. We know that we're going to end up needing Swig. I always forget one of them. Yes, thank you. Bootstrap, and we're not even going to need jQuery for this yet. And I'll do a save thank you. A lot of this stuff you've seen. I'm going to go through it relatively quickly. So let me open this up. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start setting up my task. So this is going to be, I'm going to go to my package.json file. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say start dev. And when I end up starting my dev, I'm going to say database URL. Never hurts to type out some Postgres connection strings, localhost, and I'm going to call this Acme offices stores demo. And I'm going to specify nodemon server. Okay? So if I end up running start dev, this will end up breaking because it can't find the server file, and that's what we're going to start off with. So we'll go over here, we'll start setting up our server file. Okay? So now I've got my server file. Now right off the bat, again, depending on how you end up approaching this, I'm going to assume that I've got this DB object, and I'm going to do require /DB here. And I'm going to, again, this is going to end up breaking because it can't find DB. But what I'm going to end up hoping that I could end up doing is do something like DB dot seed, okay, and then and say console.log seeded. Otherwise, catch console.log x. Okay? Again, none of this could possibly work because DB is not there yet. So let's actually go in and set this up. Again, I like to set up a folder called DB. Within that folder, I like to have an underscore DB, which is going to be sort of the access to my sequelize object. I'm going to do a const for sequelize. Again, I like to use capital, require, sequelize. And I'm going to go over here and specify that my actual connection, and I could name it something other than DB, my connection to my database is going to be a new sequelize object. And all I need to have is my process environment database URL. Okay? Nothing really will error out here. There's no real issues here. Okay? But when I start trying to sync this, if this database doesn't exist and I have some models, I'm going to have some errors. So I'm going to do module exports equals this connection object. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to end up adding in my index.js. I'm going to do const, and I'll call it connection, just so maybe there's a little bit less confusion. /DB, which is really my sequelize connection object. And if I do this, right, it's going to tell me that seed is not a function. But let's realize that there's going to probably be a couple of things that we want to do. We're going to probably want to sync. And when we go to sync, this is simply going to be a function. And we could do it on a one-liner that says, hey, look, this is going to be a connection, sync, force, true. That's a one-liner. Function ends up returning this promise. This gives me the ability to do something like seed. And if I end up doing seed, this is going to be a couple of more lines. And when I do that, I'm going to actually do return. For now, I'm just going to do return sync. And things that I want to end up exporting, module.exports, I'm going to want to end up exporting. Again, what do I want to give people access to do? I want them to be able to sync. I want them to be able to seed. And I'm going to have some models that don't yet exist that I'm going to end up putting on this. Okay. By the way, no errors because it's not really trying to do anything when it syncs because I have no models that are defined. Let's start setting up our models. Okay? So one of the things that we'll end up doing here, we're going to have a office model. Require ./office. And if we go over here, we'll see that this doesn't exist. So if we go over here, we could specify office.js in capital O because this is my big model. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to need my connection require ./DB. And now I could say const office equals connection define office. I want my table to be lowercase. And an office is just going to have a name. And my connection object has sequelize attached to it. That's just the way that it works. And this is going to be a string. And I'm going to say module.exports equals office. Now, once I end up doing that, I should get an error that makes a little bit more sense that says this database doesn't exist. And if I go back here to my SQL, create database, now I'll have this database. And if I was to go back over here and now do something like this and say const store equals require store, right? what will end up happening is that this thing is going to break because store doesn't exist. So let's go back and set that up. All right, again, not that big a deal. Store.js, const connection require /db, that's my connection object. Connection.define, this is going to be store. I sometimes don't like to copy and paste these because when I do, I forget to change some things like my table name, and you get a little bit screwed up where different models are pointing to the same table. Really doesn't make any sense. And here, I'm going to go in here, and these two are going to have a name, connection, sequelize, string, module.exports equals, and let's give this a variable. So if something's not going to change, which this isn't, we'll use our ES6 here. And if I go and do that, I should see seeded. Not only that, if I end up connecting to this database and I do a D, I'll see that I've got my two tables. And if I see a D of offices, I'll see my office. If I see a D of stores, I'm going to see my stores. Okay? Well, there's one other one that we want to have here. And this is going to be an idea of having a place, which is going to be sort of the same thing you're going to be doing in the workshop. Place, again, const connection equals require /db. Const place db, connection define place singular. So this is actually going to have two properties. So we'll specify that we have a latitude, and this is going to be connection, sequelize, decimal. Okay? You could look and figure out when's best to use decimal and when's best to use float. I get confused by that. So I could be wrong, and maybe this should be a float, something along this line, but I knew that there's going to be a dot somewhere in these numbers, so it's going to be one or the other. Connection, sequelize, decimal for this, and module.exports equals place. And now if we end up going over here, back to our index, we could also bring in place, require /place, in which case we could start doing our associations. Do you mind if I wait till the end? Let me go over here, and we're going to specify that an office belongs to a place, okay? And also a store belongs to a place, okay? And if I do that, I should see that I have places here, and if I do a D for offices, I'll see that there's a place ID. If I do a D for stores, I'll see that there's a place ID. If I do a D for places, I'll see that there's a latitude and there's a longitude. So now once I have that under my belt here, what I can actually do is actually go through the process of seeding some data. Now here's where I'm actually just going to do a little copying and pasting here, and I'm just going to do that so I can end up grabbing some data for these places. So here, we'll go in here, and I'm going to put in, these are the latitude and longitudes for these three things. So I'm going to go over here, and let's actually, when we go to seed, we're going to do a sync, and then we'll do a then. And all we're going to do here is let's do a promise.all. And what are we going to do with promise.all? Well, for promise.all, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to do a places.map. Okay? So basically, what we want to do is we want to come up with three basically sequelized statements that are going to create these places from the places. So what we can end up doing here is that we're going to do places.map, and we'll specify that we're going to have a And there's one thing I actually forgot to do for places. I'm going to do that in a second. So when we end up doing places.map, we could go over here. Let's make sure I did it here. Oh yeah, I've got the name here. I apologize. I need to put the name in my model too. That one I left out. So before I do this, let me go in here. And let me just go back. I think I had mentioned that before. So for my place, I'm also going to have a name, connection, sequelize. It makes a little more sense. Sequelize string. And now if I go back here to my index, what I'm going to end up doing is mapping over each of these places. So promise.all places.map. I'm mapping over something. I'm mapping over a place. And I'm just going to return place.create that place. Okay? Now what this gives me is an array of places. And so if I ended up coming back here, this is going to end up giving me a result. Just for the sake of argument, console.log result.0.get should give me my Statue of Liberty, if in fact I don't have any typos. Let's take a look. And there's my Statue of Liberty. So let's set this up so that we're going to come in here, and this is just one way to do this. I'm going to set up 3 variables here. I'll say Statue of Liberty. I'll say Empire State Building. And I'll say full stack. And what I'm going to end up doing here is that when I end up getting my result, I'll show you something kind of interesting that you could do. You could actually go over here. This is a different type of destructuring than you've probably seen before. What this allows you to do is to actually do destructuring of an array. So what you can do here is now you could go over here and say Statue of Liberty is the first one, okay? Empire State Building is the second, and full stack is the third. So this is an ES6 thing, and what that should allow me to do is that if I then ended up going in here and putting a then over here just for the sake of argument, and I say console.log Empire State Building.name, I should see Empire State Building, which I end up seeing. So again, this is just, you've seen destructuring where you have an object. This is something a little bit new, but this is destructuring. All it allows you to do is saying, hey, look, given an array, I want to pull out that array. Again, this is going to work if the array has 3 items in it, okay? Which our array does because I've got 3 places. And what this allows me to do is instead of me saying result 0 is this, result 1 is this, result 2 is this, which you can do and it'd be totally legitimate. Just a little bit of ES6 sugar, and you don't have to use it. This is something new that's being introduced here. So once we end up doing that, let's actually go in, and we don't have to do this all on, one line here. But let's go in here and we'll do this separately. We'll do another promise.all. And here, let's go and create our 3 offices. So we're going to have a office.create. We'll give this a name, and we'll say this is going to be the SL office. And we'll give it a place ID of Statue of Liberty ID. We can do the same thing with the other 2. So we'll have an ESB office, and this is going to be the Empire State Building ID. And we could do one more, and this is going to be for the full stack. So we'll say full stack office. And this will be for full stack ID. And if this is working, one way we could test this out is by going back to here, and we could go over here and say select star from offices, we see 3 offices with 3 different place IDs, we know we're in decent shape. Okay? On the same token, we could do another promise.all. Your computer.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
okay.
Which one?
It's
Both?
that one.
This
No.
one. Pretty.
Thank you.
So we could go over here and we could say that we're going to have a store. We'll only do 2 stores just to differentiate these. We'll say that we have a store at the Statue of Liberty. Place ID is Statue of Liberty. We'll say that we have one at the Empire State Building. So this is going to be a store. And we'll also say that, well, those are the 2 that we'll end up doing. And if this worked, we should be able to say select star from stores. So that didn't work. So let's see if we have an error here. Unexpected token. So let's look promise.all, and I don't know if it's that.
It's right.
Thank you. Good call. And if we go here, select star from stores. No?
You didn't put the tail end of the array. Oh, you should.
Let's see. Second promise.all.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait a second.
26.
Promise.all. So wait, this is
Line 26.
line 26.
That's an array too. Those 3 are an array.
Yeah, but that's working. Promise.all.
Promise is not defined.
No, that wouldn't do it. Promise.all. Let's just take a quick look here. You're right. This should totally be like this. Let's just take a look and see what happens now. There's offices. Select star from stores. You got me. All right. Well, yeah, for sure, promise.all should be an array, which it is now. So now we actually, in fact, have data that's seeded. Again, didn't end up opening up our browser, didn't do any page reloads, but we have data now that's in our system. And this is going to allow us to go in and sort of get moving here a lot quicker, which is to say express equals require express. And I'm going to say const app equals express. There's some things that I'm going to need here. Swig, require swig. I'll go over here. I'll say swig. So I'd like to put it here. Swig set defaults. Cache false. And for our app.set, the engine is going to be HTML, and app.engine, the HTML engine is going to use swig.render file. Okay? So once I end up having that here, as long as I'm here, let me actually just go in and set up a static route, which I'm going to end up needing for Bootstrap. So I'll say app.use, and I'd like to put this under vendor, express.static. I like to use path.join, directory name, node modules. It's one less thing that I have to do later. And I'll go over here and say constant path equals require path. I'm going to have to listen somewhere. So I'll say port equals process.environment port for 3000. And I'll say app.listen port, and we'll have a callback console.log listening on port. So if we end up doing that and going back here, we're going to have a problem because I actually have this in use for what I was showing you before. Let's kill this, run it again. And that'll end up starting. Every time it starts, it's going to end up seeding data, which is okay for now. And we'll go over here and we'll say, we're going to do an app.get / request response next. So here's we're going to have to do something asynchronously. And we might as well go over here and say const models equals db.models. Now, I am a little concerned here. Let's just check on something. Forgot to end up exporting my models here. So let me put in office, store, and place. Because I'm going to need those here so that once I have my models, I'm going to go over here and I'll say models. Let's actually do a promise.all because there's two things we could get independently. Promise.all. And we're going to end up getting our models.office find all, models.store.find all, and we'll put a then here, and this is going to end up giving us our result. And for now, we'll end up just keeping it kind of simple. We'll say response.render index, and we'll do it the non-ES6 way, although we could always change it, where we'll say offices equals result 0. They come back in order if they're both satisfied. Stores, result 1. And just to be safe, we're going to do a catch here for next in case we end up having an error here. So now if we end up doing this, assuming this starts, and I go over here and I'll reload this page, the error that I'm going to get is that it can't find the index, which is okay. Let's start setting that up. So one thing I can do here is we could go in, start setting up our views. And this is going to be index.html. And this is going to be, we'll do our head, closing head. We'll do, excuse me. Silly. So here we'll specify that we're going to bring in our link. It's got to be a style sheet. And the href is going to be /vendor bootstrap dist bootstrap, excuse me, dist CSS. If you ever change that, I'm in trouble. Bootstrap CSS. And we'll go over here and put our body tag here. And if I did something like putting in a pre-tag, and I went over here and I specified that this is going to be offices, again, you'll end up getting an overflow error if you just do this. And the reason why is that it doesn't really know what to print out here. So here we want to be specific, and we want it as JSON. Now, if you look at this, you'll see the place ID, but you won't see the place. So let's actually get the places with the place ID by going here. And for each of these, we'll go in here and we'll do a simple include. And we'll do an include for place. And an include for place. Once we end up doing that, if this reloads, place is not defined. Okay, that's good. At least we see that error message there. So this is not just place. This is going to be what? Models.place. And now, give it a second. If that runs, I'll see not only do I have my place ID, but I've got my place as well. So what I'm going to do is start setting up this page a little bit better. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to put a div class is container. Again, some of this is also experimenting a little bit more with Bootstrap. I'll put an H1, and this is going to be Acme offices stores demo. And I'm going to put a div here with a class of row. And I want to have two columns here, so I'm going to do a div with a class of column. And you worked on some of the CSS here, but I want this to always be half the screen. So I'm going to do column xx6, and I'll do drop downs here. Bless you. And I'll go over here and I'll put in map here. So I've got the two sides here, and what I'm going to do is start setting up these drop downs. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a div. I'm going to do a class. Actually, this is going to eventually be in a form, so I'm going to set it up in a form now. I'm going to give this a class of well. Again, these are things that you can experiment with a little bit. This is going to be a class of form group because I want to have a select object with some padding. And now I'm going to have a select object. I'm going to give this a class of form control, I think it is. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to loop over. This is going to be for office in offices. And I'll do a and for. And what I'm going to do up here is that I'm going to go and put in an option. And we'll do a value, and the value is going to be office.id. And this is going to be, we'll say office.name. And let's also, just so we have it, also put the office. Don't forget, an office has a populated place, and it has a place as well. So now I should have a select object for my office, which I do, and let's go over here because eventually we're going to put in a button, class of btn primary, and this is going to say, when we actually set up our days up, we'll say add visit with this button. And let's move this out of our form group so that we actually take advantage of that padding. And I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to take this stuff and copy it. And I'm going to go over here. Instead of office, this is going to be store. In stores, this is going to be store ID. And this is going to be store name. A store has a place, belongs to a place. It's been populated. And I'm going to say, let's just to be clear, this is going to be an office visit. And this is going to be a store visit. So now once I end up doing that, I'll see that these are populated. Here's my stores. And here are my offices. Last thing that I'm going to do here is this is nothing that we haven't seen before. Maybe using select objects, which we haven't really looked at before. But again, in this part of the workshop, these aren't being hooked up anyway. Let's set up our map. And in order to do our map, I'm going to put a div here. And I'm going to give this an ID of map. OK. And let's actually go in here and I'll put in map goes here. Well, how do I get a map? Okay. Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit here because I don't know the exact URL. But this is going to be something that's going to be in your workshop anyway. But if we go to our views here, I'm going to grab this Google API. Now, in the workshop, it'll talk about setting up an API key. Eventually, you will have to set up an API key and let Google know you're going to be using this service. If you really had people using it in anything even related to anything commercial, this only gives you sort of a minimal number of requests. But one of the things that'll happen is once I end up putting this in here and I reload this, you'll see that I'll get a warning that I don't have an API key after this ends up connecting to Google. That's fine. I don't really need an API key. For now, for this workshop, I'm going to put a script tag. I'm not even going to do it in a separate file. Right? In the next demo, we'll start looking at getting back into Webpack and setting up our separate files. For now, I want you to realize that since Google is on the page, if I do a console.log and I end up doing a console.log for Google, and this is what I end up getting from this script, google.maps.map. If I end up doing that, I'll see that I'll end up getting a function back here. And what this allows me to do is to create Google Maps.map. And the only thing that this map really needs is going to be an element on the page. And I'm simply going to use document, get element by ID, and the ID for that is going to be map. And if I end up doing that, it's not going to quite work. Okay? You see my text went away, but where's my map? If I go over here and I take a look at it, there's going to be a couple of issues here. One of them, if I actually look at my div, I'll see that there is a bunch of stuff that's in here for where the map is, but I don't really see anything here. One of the problems that I have here is that you actually have to have a height on this element. So I'm going to give it a style, height, 500 pixels. Okay? Now I get something, and it looks like it's doing something, but there's really nothing there. Well, the other thing that you really have to do here is you have to actually give a little bit more information about this map. So one of the things that the map comes with is options. And if you end up getting the options of the map, you could specify that what you want to end up doing with the map is that there's a map type ID. No, I don't have this memorized. I could copy and paste it. It's not really that much stuff here. This is going to be Google, and this is going to be maps, and it's going to be a map type ID of road map. Let's see if that buys me anything. Again, we'll do these one at a time, experiment a little bit. Still not too much, right? Well, what else does it need? There's also another property that it's going to need here, which is going to be a zoom. These are a bunch of different settings. I don't think this is going to be enough to show us our map yet. What it really needs to have is some center of the map, I'm assuming, unless I ended up missing something. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a center position here, and I actually have the latitude and longitude of full stack here, and this is actually going to be a new Google Maps, and this is going to be a latitude, longitude, and I'm going to hard code this for the moment. In fact, let's do it this way. Let's see if that gives us our map, and then we can move on to something else. And let's take a look, and I think we probably have an error here. So unexpected token, and that is right here, right. Thank you. All right, look at that. Nice map. So this is one of those things where if you did this, believe me, there's a ton of questions on Stack Overflow. I'm doing a new Google map. All I see is this beige thing, and it's a result of the fact that you have to have the center. Let's just test something out real quick. What if we take out map type ID? Now, so let's see, we put in, that's the minimum, I guess, you're right. What about just a zoom? Well, I guess it'll work without the zoom, all right. I mean, I guess it'll work without the map type, right, but it needs to have the zoom. So it needs to basically have a center and how big you want the map to be. We'll keep this in here for the moment. Now, what I want to do here is something else. I want to actually use my offices in a little bit of a different way. So I'm going to put there's nothing that prevents me from having multiple script tags on the page. I just want to show you something here. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to put in offices. And I want this to be JavaScript. So I'm going to create a variable called offices. Now notice what I'm doing here, right? This is going to be Swift, right? This is Swift. This is happening on the server, okay? And again, I don't want to have, if I just do this, what's going to happen? I'm going to get that call stack exceeded. So I'm going to go over here and put in JSON, okay? The problem that I'm going to have here is notice it says syntax error, okay? What's that syntax error from? If I went and I looked at my source code, view, developer, view source, it's trying to protect me. Okay? It's trying to protect me to say, hey, look, I'm not just going to let you spit out, maybe this is information that you got from a user. I'm going to actually encode this data. I'm going to URL encode it, just in case someone had some malicious JavaScript that they were able to get into your database and that someone was injecting on the page. But this is our code, right? This is coming from our database. We didn't end up injecting anything. And since we didn't end up injecting anything, what we want to say is, hey, look, do me a favor. Give it to me as raw data. Actually, I could even reload from here, and I'll see that now I have my offices. Now, what I want to do here is I'm going to end up creating markers from my offices. So markers are something you end up doing with a map. And the way that I'm going to end up creating my markers is I'm going to take my offices and I'm going to map them. Notice I'm not using my ES6 because, again, I don't know what's supported in a browser or not. If we're using Webpack, we'd be able to do that. This is going to be an office. If I went over here and I just said return the office, or I say console.log office, I would see console.log, and 3 times I would see a object spitting out with all this information. Now, what I want to end up doing here is that I want to create a marker. And so what I'm going to do with this marker is I'm going to create these 3 markers. And so this is going to return a new Google.maps.marker. Well, what does a marker need to have? A marker it's going to need, because it's going to be on a map, is it's going to need a position. Okay? Well, one of the things that I could do for my position is that I'm going to specify that my position is going to be a new Google Maps latitude, longitude, and let me also specify a title, and this is going to be my office.name. Okay? So for my lat lang, this is going to be my latitude and longitude, and this is going to be my office dot place latitude, my office dot place longitude. So now I've got 3 markers. Let's just see what we have here. Console.log markers. Okay? So I've got 3 markers here. Now what I'm going to do with my markers, and again, I don't have to necessarily do it in this order, but there's a reason why I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to say for all of my markers for each, now I've got a marker. So a marker has no affiliation with a map. But I'm going to specify, hey, marker, set your map to the map that we ended up creating up here. Now if I do this, I'll see that I have a marker that's here. Notice I don't see my other markers, even though they are there. Okay? What I really want to be able to do is that when I end up adding my markers, what I want to do is I want to adjust the bounds of the map itself. So again, these are all sort of new things that you're seeing here. But what I have the ability to do is to create a bounds object and specify that my bounds object is going to be a new Google Maps latitude, longitude, bounds. I'm not doing anything with it yet. So once I end up adding the marker, what I can do is now I can take this bounds object and say, hey, look, I have this bounds object. I want to extend it. I want to extend it with the marker's position. Okay? So now I've got a bounds object that I'm modifying. I'm extending this bounds object. The bounds object has no connection to the map. So now I have to complete the loop by saying map fit bounds to my bounds object. Now if I reload this, map fit bound, no fit bounds. And now I see all three of them will end up showing up here. Okay? This is all the Google API. This is about the extent of the Google API that you need. I'm going to stop this recording. We'll end up taking a couple of questions, and then we'll end up starting on the workshop.